Okay, terrific. Sharon went to grab a pen, so let's wait for her to come back and then we'll call the meeting to order.
I'm back.
Okay, great. We'll call the meeting to order. It's Tuesday, October 4th at 9:04. So Peter regrettably can't make it to this meeting today. He's traveling for business. So we have a quorum with just Sharon and I, and we'll go through this agenda. The first item on the agenda, let me get to it. I believe it's just to approve the minutes. Hang on. Yep, approve the minutes from September 6th. I read them as I always do and looked at them. Sharon, I don't know if you have any changes. No.
I have no changes.
Could you make a motion to approve the minutes from September 6th?
Yep. I move that we approve the policy committee. I move that the policy committee approve the meetings for the September 6th, 2022 meeting.
Okay, I will second that. And do we have any discussion? I don't have anything. Sharon, do you?
No, we're good.
Okay. All right, so let's vote to approve those. I'm Melissa. I vote in
Aye,
favor.
Sharon.
Okay, great. All right, so that motion passes. The minutes are approved. We have, a relatively brief agenda today. 3 policies. The first one that is up is student discipline. And we had put this on the agenda because we wanted to, if you recall, Sharon, wanted to work through the inclusive language, some of our most important policies that are most frequently used, I should say.
Right.
And go through them with an eye for inclusive language and just kind of adopt them, 1 or 2 each month if we can. So that's what Jody went through and did for this policy. I went through and read it too. I noticed a few things, Jody, I'm going to mention, and then maybe we can just make those revisions. And then if Sharon has any comments, otherwise we're not reviewing this substantively unless anyone has any substantive issues, but we did review this.
47 pages. I'm good.
Yeah, no, we did actually review this policy. I remember it maybe in the last year or two. So
it's good. It's really inclusive. I mean,
it's
very,
very in depth. Yes.
Yes.
Jody, on page 2, Roman M.
I did that one. Yep.
Yeah.
Weston.
Yeah, I fixed that.
Okay, got it. All right. On page 25. I'm scrolling through it as I'm talking to you. Just want to make sure I've got it. 25. Roman 8, letter A, 1, parents or guardians. We need to add.
Oh, okay.
It just says the parents of the student must be notified. Parents, guardians. Okay. And then this was on Shipman's part, and I think it just must be a slightly outdated form. On page 38, which is it's not actually numbered 38. It's our page 38 in our agenda.
Okay.
It's what they're calling put on Board of Ed letterhead. It's the letter.
Okay. I was going to ask you about that. Is that something that we include within this document itself, or is that something that we keep separately for our own use?
It's unclear to me. I had that same thought in reading through it.
That's why I didn't modify this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to see.
I think these are our sample documents.
Yeah.
What did the last one have?
It didn't have.
I don't see why these need to be.
You're in the bullying prevention and intervention policy?
Not yet.
No, student
It's in
discipline.
the agreement.
In student discipline.
We're on pages like 38 through the 40s of the agenda, not of the actual policy.
I was actually going to put a call into Shipman and see whether or not this is something that actually needs to be included in the policy itself when we post it, or whether or not these are forms that I can keep in a file. So if we ever come across this, we already have access to all of this.
Yeah, I would think it's probably the latter, but see what
I
they
think so
say.
too.
Yep, I will do that.
It's just adding, I mean,
More
it's
paperwork.
yeah.
for
it's
that.
not, it's
I've never
nothing
seen
substantive.
forms I've
Yeah.
never
Yeah.
seen forms in policies.
I
Okay.
haven't either.
It's
Yep.
a folder that goes to the staff.
Yeah, I agree with
Right.
that.
What I can do is I can create a shared drive for us, or for leadership that has these forms, ready to go in there. So if we ever need them, we have them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely a good idea. And then I
Okay.
would just on page, maybe look over these. There's a few places where it doesn't say parent guardian, it just says
Okay.
parent,
Right.
like on page 38 and 41. It just
Okay.
says the
Very
name of
bottom.
parents,
Yeah.
while we're doing this.
Yep.
Um,
Will do.
okay, so that's all I had. I thought the rest of the changes had all either been made by you or by Shipman, and they
Mhm.
look good to me.
Me too. I'm with you.
Okay, so
Good
I
eye,
think.
Melissa.
Yeah, oh, thanks. Jody, so once that's done, we can add this for a first read
Mhm.
at October. I don't need to see it again. That'll be
Got it.
fine at the October meeting.
Yep.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is policy 1250, which is the visitor policy and observations in schools. Now, we also looked at this relatively recently because I recall this policy. But I know we had asked Tracy in light of, a lot of the things that were happening in her department, if there were policies that she wanted to make modifications to or to discuss more broadly. And these were two, this visitor policy and the bullying policy that she had suggested. So does she have any, she doesn't have any changes yet, Lisa? Is that where it stands? That she just hasn't had an opportunity to look over it?
Hasn't had an opportunity to look over it.
Okay, all right.
She's a busy lady, Tracy.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
understood. I looked over it myself, but I'm most interested in Tracy's thoughts. So let's bring this up at our next meeting to see if she has any thoughts that she wants to address. And if she
Jody,
feels
can
like
you-
this policy is adequate.
Jody, can you, or should one of us remind her, just kind of nudge her a little bit
Mhm.
to see if she can have a little peek at this? Because it's 9 pages, but a lot of it is just kind of,
Yes, it's on her desk already. I will remind her, and I'll let her
Okay.
know that we're going to bring it back for the November meeting if she has any additional changes.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's
perfect.
better. I really don't want to just bring this forward to the board without Tracy's input.
Agreed.
Unless she says it's wonderful. But even then, I feel like, it needs to go through the process of coming to us first. So let's move it to November. And then we have is there anything in the policy, Sharon, that you wanted to discuss? Because we can have Lisa or Jody bring some issues forward to Tracy from this policy. I
You know
don't
what?
have any concerns.
I had the same mindset as you. I read through it briefly. Everything seems okay to me right now, but at the same time, I'm just interested in her feedback to see what her thoughts are. She's the one who's in the trenches, so.
All right, so let's do that and make sure this comes back to us. The next policy is the bullying. Now this one, I had some thoughts about, and I'd really like to discuss it a little bit as a committee before it goes to Tracy. We're on page, let me see. It's 5131.911. And Lisa, I'd love your thoughts on this one too. I think I'm on page 60. Is that right? Let me look.
No, page 60? There's only 28 pages on this one.
Oh, I meant page 60 of the agenda, just so you guys can find it. Yes. If you're pulling it up separately, then it's page.
I'm not pulling it up separately.
So 60 for Lisa. Which page is that if we're pulling it up separately?
I think, well, it's just the first, we'll start. at
I
the
have a
beginning.
hard copy.
Okay. All right. Well, then everyone has it.
Old school. Good.
I just have it on the agenda and it's page 60. So,
All right, well, why don't you give
yeah,
me the section, the Roman numeral.
sure. Let's see. Let's start off with, oh, I didn't write it down. Let me find it with my own eyes. Bear with me. I think it's in the regulation related to the Safe School Climate Plan, but let me yes,
is
it
it
is.
11?
It's the definition of bullying. Roman 2, under the Safe School Climate Plan.
Okay, just a minute.
I mean, my comments are really broad comments, and it's also in the regulation on page 1.
Okay, so it's number 2. Okay, I'm here. Definition of bullying. Yeah.
Yep.
And that same definition I'm noticing is on page 1 of the policy, so the very first page as well, where it says, for the purpose of this policy, bullying means an act that is direct or indirect and severe, persistent, or pervasive, which, 1, causes physical or emotional harm to an individual. 2, places an individual in reasonable fear of physical or emotional harm. Or 3, infringes on the rights or opportunities of an individual in school. This policy that we're passing, all of this related to the Safe School Climate Plan, is this new, or have we always had a Safe School Climate Plan and a Safe School Climate Officer and a review of what constitutes bullying, and then a verified statement about whether something is a verified bullying event, and then it goes into a student's record? Is any of that already happening, or is this a new component of the policy?
I would say that it happened, but this is really putting additional parameters and structures around it. Like
Okay.
if, and let me explain, if I had a situation where under B, the definition of the bullying, if somebody was, what happens is let's say somebody reports that they were made fun of because of their sexual orientation at the high school. Okay, so you investigate that. All right. And then you have to determine is it bullying? Is it not bullying? And you investigate using the tools that you have. And if it's a verified thing of bullying, yeah, the person that does this, it's documented, it becomes part of their file. There's a disciplinary consequence.
Yeah, I think where I'm struggling with this a little bit is Roman 1. I mean, number 1 and 2, emotional harm, because I think right now in the climate that we have, what is emotional harm, and how do we ensure that what's happening is actually bullying and not something else, right? It's very difficult to prove and to establish emotional harm. It's also, I think, we talk about, for social emotional development and learning with students, building resiliency and things like that. I mean, how do we establish when somebody is truly emotionally harmed, significantly emotionally harmed, versus, something else, something that was said that hurt somebody's feelings, something that was said in a classroom that reflects a political viewpoint or a religious viewpoint or a cultural viewpoint that another student doesn't share. How do we ensure that robust discussion in the classroom is happening, and students aren't feeling that they need to censor themselves, for risk of causing emotional harm to another student or to a teacher? Because there is emotional harm. Emotional harm exists and needs to be something that we protect our students against. Absolutely. Nobody in our district should be emotionally harmed for any reason, particularly those that are listed in this policy. But there are also, other things that happen in the course of just friendship and human relationship that we need to make sure that we're not putting in a student's record. So I have concerns about what constitutes emotional harm. I have concerns about the review process. How is this established to be a verified instance of bullying? Who's making those decisions?
It's the administrator that has to conduct the review process. The administrator must investigate. And investigation can take, every case is different. A kid goes to the counselor, for example, at the high school and says something. Then the administrator has to investigate. And an investigation could be, I had to do it. You get the class list, you figure out what's going on. It depends on if it was in the classroom, who do you talk to? I always start with, you talk to the person that was allegedly emotionally harmed. Then you look at the class list. Then you figure out, was it the teacher that inadvertently said something? What happened? And it takes time, and you investigate, talking to people that were perhaps in the classroom. It depends on where it was in the classroom. If it related to an assignment or something, you might even look at student work. There's no one size fits all, but you have to be very thorough in what you look at. And then there's a determination whether it was or wasn't. Because sometimes, yes, it could be a flip, unkind comment does not necessarily mean emotional harm.
Right.
Unless it's so egregious that if a child does not want to walk into a class and sit there because he is so uncomfortable, there's a problem.
Yes,
But
agreed.
that takes time, and it takes sort of a team effort. But it has to be a certified administrator that investigates.
Because it looked to me that the school climate officer had some role in this process, and I didn't know who that was or how that person gets that position. When you go down to, I think we're in the 60s, development and review of the Safe School Climate Plan. Procedures for reporting and investigating complaints of bullying. Such reports may be filed with any building administrator and or the Safe School Climate Specialist.
Okay. And that's where they're putting in more language about this. If I looked at the Safe School Climate Coordinator, quite frankly, that right there has to be an administrative team consisting or comprising of the assistant principals or the assistant principal. There's no separate person that's in charge of Safe School Climate.
So there is
That's what I
no
wanted to-
officer.
No. And so that's maybe something that if we were going to look a little bit more carefully at that, I would like to bring it to the leadership team, because we do not have a Safe School Climate Coordinator. We have, just a moment, we have school security and safety plans that, we don't make public, that goes to the state. But this is a little bit different than that. The school security and safety plan, this is talking about, and the assistant principal is very involved in this. This is talking about climate within the school. That, yes, it could be safety within the school, but it's different. We're not talking about a bomb threat. We're not talking about an evacuation. We're talking about this. So do we have a coordinator? Yes. And according to this policy, we better firm it up and make sure that the assistant principal is listed, because that's who it would be.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean that, whoever's making these determinations, I think, needs to have their finger on the pulse of a thorough investigation and kind of the climate of the school and understanding the context of what's happening, because we really need to do a very careful balance of protecting our students from significant physical and emotional harm, of course, but we also need to protect our students who, many of these all of them are still children, and they may say or do something that we need to educate them as to why that may or may not be appropriate, without a draconian response in some circumstances.
No, I hear exactly what you're saying. So what I think that we need to do with this, and let me see something, is 1019 is the next district leadership meeting. Oh no.
What?
Oh no. I thought it was I'm looking at a calendar, and it's fine. We need to bring this first to the principals and then the district leadership team to go through this to make sure that we have all of this reviewed and everything, because it talks about the committee and stuff. And then we'll have to bring it back.
Yeah, and I would too, Lisa, I would ask Tracy for her thoughts on, just the very basic definition of bullying. That's really what this is all going to come down to. Is it any physical or emotional harm? Is it significant physical or emotional harm? Is it any physical harm but significant emotional harm? And how can we make sure that we have language that captures what we're trying to protect, while still maintaining freedom of speech and a robust dialogue in our classrooms where children can reflect all different types of viewpoints without fear of recrimination.
I think that when they talk about severe, persistent, or pervasive, that's where, those are, and again, it's subjective, but when it talks about severe, persistent, or pervasive, it keeps happening. And it doesn't necessarily happen to the same kid, but if someone keeps harassing let's say there's someone that keeps harassing students that perhaps, I don't know, let's say they're students of color, that's bullying. It doesn't necessarily have to be to the one student, but if someone harasses students of color, different students, but still does that and it's pervasive, that's bullying. Many times it's a one-time thing, and
It
it's
can
not.
be, yeah.
And that's not determined. That doesn't mean there isn't a consequence or everything else. Sometimes it's just a one-time thing. And that's why it's so important to nip it in the bud when it happens with everyone in the school. Like, we don't do that here, whatever, because you don't want it to be pervasive. The other thing is that it could be so egregious, like so over the top and egregious, even if it's only once, it could be deemed bullying. Now, what does that look like? It would be something like, just total
a name,
extreme, or doing something to someone like a public humiliation, or really, really, it has to rise up. But generally, what happens is the administrator walks through this, determines whether it's not, and works in conjunction with the other building administrators. Like when I would investigate and everything, I would share my findings, and this is what I thought, and blah blah blah.
When does it become a part of a student's record? So the complaint is filed, and then the administrator is reviewing this, and then at some point it becomes a verified instance of bullying, and then it becomes part of the child's record, or is it?
Well, what
I just
happens,
want to make sure it's not on the record until there's been an appropriate.
I think people have a fear that there's this big permanent file, and I get it, that goes off somewhere, and where does it go, or how is it? Basically, if there is an act of bullying, it would be recorded under a disciplinary log in the child's record. Okay. So I could open up a child, and not everybody has access to this. And I could see, administrators do, like, with anything, bus incidents, different things, or there could be an entry that might say something like, Nicholas Saketa was involved in a verified act of bullying, blah, 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 blah. That's where it would live. The letter would be sent to the Saketas. Okay. They would have the letter. The administrator would have the letter. Now, when you go to, everyone's always worried about when you apply to school or this and that. That letter is not sent anywhere or disclosed.
Right.
It's just there. If somebody gets suspended, there's a question that says, have you been suspended? We don't provide that information.
It's up to the student to supply the information.
Exactly. So it's just kind of there. But when I go into a CUME file, for example, and I look at a CUME file, I don't see all these disciplinary letters on kids. I don't. I can look in the log and see if there's been anything. If it was an expulsion or suspension, there'd be a record in the electronic log. But the administrator keeps a file. Like, I keep a file in my office of every child that's been suspended, just for my own quantitative data. But it's not. I hope I'm explaining myself. It's not something that every teacher sees, that it's public. It's not.
No, I hear you, but I'm sure there are some instances where a child, as part of an application for something, would be asked if they've ever had a disciplinary action against them. I can't think of what it is off the top of my head right now. I mean, maybe they're applying to the clergy or politics, or the military, or something,
or the Air Force, or something like that. There's certain things. That is really up to them to disclose it.
Yeah.
And let's say someone transferred or something like that. They have to sign a release. We can't just discuss those things with other schools.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that, if these are, anytime there's an element of subjectivity to some of these things, right? It's different than the policy we were just looking at, right? Where you bring a gun onto school premises, or
of course, yeah,
or
of course.
something like that. It's very cut and dry. It's very clear, emotional harm, I think is a little more squishy. So I would like to hear Tracy's thoughts on that. I mean, is there a way to make sure that that's significant emotional harm? Is there a way to say that? Is there a way to have a more robust committee that's reviewing this rather than just the assistant principal? But maybe
Well, it talks about that in the policy, so I'm going to go through it with the leadership team
Yeah.
on October 19th. It
Yeah, I
talks
think that's
about a
fine.
committee and everything else.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you
I'm-
one thing: bullying. If we say it's a verified act of bullying, we take that really seriously because you're right, and it has to the data has to be triangulated. We have to be really sure before we make any kind of a determination on that. It's
Yeah.
not
And
flippant at all.
I would query the leadership team too, then, if something is labeled a verified act of bullying, which is a significant occurrence, is there, I didn't see in the policy, an appeal process. Is there a process for expunging that from the record if people can, have a right to, no, you're shaking.
I will tell you this: in any process with discipline, people have the right to due process. We do not expunge. We don't.
Yeah.
We do not expunge. It would have to be, as high school principal, I never expunged anything. That's
You
what-
don't expunge, but like you said, you don't share either unless there's a signed release because these are minors.
It would have to be a very extreme case to expunge something.
Mm-hmm. Well, then that may be that if that's the case, then I think it's even more important for us to really make sure that the process for this and is fair for all students.
Yes.
I actually have something. If you're going to be discussing this amongst the leadership team, Lisa, that I think, it's worth discussing to figure out whether or not it's going to be part of a bullying campaign or bullying policy. Bullying takes on many, many forms. And we're talking about the social emotional well-being of the kids. And one thing that became obvious, especially over COVID, was the online component. And I know that we address it a little bit in this policy, but it's not necessarily bullying in the form of saying something that's offensive based upon someone's color or race or religious background, et cetera. But it has more to do with and this is, I hate to say this, but this is as painful. And I've seen, if you talk to the therapists and things and around and, suicides and suicide prevention, it's the canceling. So canceling is very much so a form of bullying. And when you have a child who is ingrained in whatever kind of group of peers and friends, and suddenly everyone turns their back on that person, it's a form of bullying.
Shunning, yeah.
The shunning. And shunning is so painful for these kids. This is such a delicate time in their lives where they're, their hormones are all over the place, their emotions are all over the place. And when they are peers who become so important in this point of their lives, all turn their backs on an individual, that leads to, we're talking depression, suicides, it runs the gamut. Is that something that is, I've heard of it a lot. Is that something we need to address in this policy?
Well, I think that one of the words in the definitions, it talks about indirect. It says whether it's direct or indirect. And I think that falls under the indirect. The other thing is that's very hard for parents to understand is people say, well, that happened in my house. That has nothing to do with school. Well, yeah, it does if the kid doesn't want to come to school.
Absolutely.
So I think that, I think that the most important thing is that the administrators and we understand the scope of it, than putting every single thing in the policy. But making sure talking it through, going over everything, looking at the actual processes. We have some case studies we can even look at of things that happened in the district. What would you do? What's the trajectory? Because the other thing is it's not just about the discipline piece, but it's also about, first of all, the victim has to get help, and the other thing is that the kid that's doing it needs help.
Or kids.
Some kind of a component.
It
Where,
can be multiple
help
kids.
isn't always like, oh, let's have a kumbaya moment with the victim. No.
Right. No.
That's not good. Sometimes you'll hear that old school, oh, let's shake and make, shake hands and make up or whatever. No, maybe that's eventually, but there's some individual things that have to happen. And that's where our counseling staff and different resources are so important.
Do we have peer mediation in the school?
No.
Is that something? I know just some schools use that practice, peer mediation. Is that something?
It might be interesting at the high school level, but it would be very difficult at the middle school level. There's too much going on between
It's
6th,
just,
7th,
we're
and
such a
8th grade.
small school district. Like there's no sense of somebody who doesn't know, I would imagine, the facts, or, I think peer mediation works well when you have, a committee of people that can hear this and are hearing it for the first time. It's hard to imagine in our school district, some of these instances are
I don't know.
more
The reason-
widespread. I don't know.
The reason why I think peer mediation sometimes is effective is because it's, once you bring it to the adults, suddenly kids behave differently and they clam up and they don't want to necessarily talk about it. And they try to put a different spin on what's actually happening. Whereas peer mediation, I think a lot of times the kids are kind of like, well, that's not really.
Yeah, no, it's a good point.
Right. So it might be something that we want to take a look at. And the reason I say that is because, Weston's a small school district. Most of the kids in Weston, the overwhelming majority of the kids in Weston have been here since kindergarten. And we've now, we've had kids who have come and gone, kids who come into the school system. There can be all kinds of situations that happen, both to kids who are in the school system and kids who are new to the school system. I mean, but it's really tricky. If you have a group of friends and suddenly you find yourself being shunned by a group of friends, trying to make another friend group is not easy in a small school where everyone is known each other since
there's 200 kids in a grade level and 104, 160 of them have been together since kindergarten. It's not easy.
It's not easy. It's not easy. And it causes all kinds of emotional distress. And, I think that we lose students because of that. I think that it's something that, as administrators, I'm sure you see it, you hit your head against the wall because there's only so much you can do. Your hands are tied. Because when you start talking to them, they put spins on it and things like that. But anyway,
I think these are really good points, Sharon. And it's, I take some of what you're saying and couple it with some of what I was saying earlier. I wonder if some of this needs to happen outside of the bullying policy. I think there might be instances where bringing this to, school administrators and having, permanent records of some of this is maybe not in everybody's best interest. So I think it's definitely a conversation for the leadership team, and let's see if this policy needs to be changed or modified or sent in a different direction, because I think, the nuts and bolts of it, when you look at what's there, if you agree with that structure, is fine. It's just, I think we're looking at like a bigger picture issues here. Is this the right policy for Weston? Are these the right parameters for our town and for our students? Are we encouraging the right types of behaviors and discouraging the wrong types of behaviors with a policy like this? Or are we exacerbating the situation? So I would like, maybe Tracy's thoughts and some of the leadership team, Lisa, and then let's bring this back for a more full discussion, because I think
that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Is this something that should be discussed on a board level before we sharpen it up in the policy
No, I
meeting
think
or
it,
committee?
it it would come to us first, and I think we would get it. And if it takes us many, many months, it can take us as many months as we want to get this the way that we want to. And then when we bring it to the board, we can bring it with a full discussion. Hey, we can even show them, this is what it used to look like, this is what it's looking like now, these are the changes we made, these are the issues we discussed about, and have a robust conversation at the board level too. It doesn't,
Okay,
we're just the representatives from the policy committee. We don't even have a majority of the board on this committee for that reason. That it needs to
Right.
go to the full board. A lot of times they just follow our recommendation, right?
Sure.
Here's the policy on student discipline, which we changed for inclusive language. You want to talk about it? We'll talk about it. If not, this is what we did, and let's vote. This is a little bit different.
I think, it's being what I just discussed with the cancellation or cancel culture.
Yeah.
It is being classified as bullying by most mental health professionals.
Okay.
It might not be a bad idea to try to find some way to incorporate that into this policy or create a separate policy around canceling. I don't know, but I think it would not be a bad idea to get the school psychologist involved in our discussion. Is there any possibility they could join us for this part of the discussion?
I like that.
We can certainly see. Let me meet with I've been taking notes, the administrators on the 19th to go through the exact establishment of the committees because of the committee and all of that. And then we can certainly come back to you and have a more robust discussion in the November meeting.
Because it's not necessarily something that what I'm discussing here, it's not necessarily something that calls for any sort of discipline per se, or any sort of record in the students, record, but it is something that I think we need to address, because when parents come to the school and they tell the school this is happening and there's no policy in place to address it, I think it's problematic, and I think we need to protect ourselves.
Yeah. I think those are good points. And maybe the school safety climate specialist doesn't need to be an individual. Maybe it's a committee with the psychologists, the counselors. Maybe it's those.
It says that on there. It says we need
Yeah.
school personnel, medical and mental health personnel. So I read that as the nurse and the psychologist.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I think this is important. We'll see where it goes.
Excellent.
Okay, that's the last thing on our agenda, I believe. Let me pull it back up. Am I right? It's so long today. Hang on. Just scroll. Policy regarding discussion of policies, regulations, and bylaws in future meetings. Okay. We were going to talk about what we're handling next. Well, this sounds like this will be
We still have a lot of stuff on our
time
plate.
consuming. And I know Jody was saying that she has alerts from Shipman about some new policies that have come in that we need to update and enact at the board meetings, because we obviously we don't want to be out of compliance with state law in certain areas. So she's going to go through and let us know which of those policies from our outside counsel we don't currently have. And then we'll start adding those to our agendas and getting those through first and second reads so that they can be adopted.
Yeah, those are simple changes. Those are easy to go. I
Yeah,
think
they
this
are
bullying
easy.
one is going to be a little
Yeah.
bit more of a bear.
We
And
need to limit the
this
amount
one
of
too.
really substantive, there's two types of policies, right? The ones we can kind of just update
Yep.
because there's a change in law, and then those that we really want to discuss that are relevant to Weston specifically. So I think
Yeah.
we can move 2 or 3 of the first category every meeting, and then we can move, have maybe one for a more robust discussion.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right.
All right. I think that's everything. Sharon, can I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Okay, I will second that, and we are finished. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, ladies.
Have a nice day.
You
You
too.
too. Bye-bye.
Bye.